Naoto Watari was a shy and awkward 16-year-old boy who cared deeply, maybe too deeply, about his little sister, Suzu. Ever since their parents died 2 years ago, Naoto had taken on the role of both brother and parent. The two of them had been passed from one relative to another, never staying in one place for long. Recently, they moved in with their aunt, Tameo, a strange woman who lived in a quiet house on the outskirts of Tokyo. One morning on the way to school, Naoto passed through a sunflower field and locked eyes with a girl who looked strangely familiar. It reminded him of his childhood, when he and a girl once played in a garden that she later destroyed before disappearing without saying goodbye. At school, a classmate asked if Naoto wanted to join a club. As always, he politely said no. He had to take care of his little sister. His classmate muttered that Naoto always used that as an excuse. Then Toki, another classmate, approached him with an idea about joining a casual group, but Naoto gave the same answer. Toki respected him for being such a caring brother and said he was also really close with his grandfather. Naoto was glad that Toki didn't tease him like others, calling him sister-obsessed. Then a cheerful and beautiful girl named Yukari invited Naoto to a meeting about building a flower bed. Nervous, Naoto gave his usual excuse about watching Suzu. Still, Yukari offered to drop off notes at his house, since they lived nearby. Before leaving, she affectionately called him little brother, making his heart race. At home that evening, Naoto cooked dinner for Suzu and asked how old she had turned last month. 10, she shouted happily. Later, as he washed the dishes, Aunt Tameo arrived and teased him for looking like his father. She handed him an envelope with a large allowance and told him to buy something nice for Suzu's birthday. Then, oddly, she joked that giving him money felt like giving it to her big brother. Naoto found her behavior strange. She never left the house and always stayed locked in her room. The next morning, Suzu asked him for help with her hair. Naoto said she should learn to do things herself, but Suzu insisted that he always take care of her. They were all each other had left. As he walked her to school, she pointed out some soybean plants, the same kind their mother once grew. When he asked what she wanted for her birthday, she smiled brightly. She was excited he hadn't forgotten. As they walked, a blonde girl wearing the same school uniform followed behind. Later at school, Toki joked about Yukari being out of Naoto's league. She had even rejected a modeling scout. Then he mentioned a new student, Tachibana Satsuki. Hearing that name made Naoto freeze. After school, the same blonde girl from earlier called his name. Her voice sent chills down his spine. He tried to ignore her, but she chased after him. Annoyed, he demanded to know what the garden destroyer wanted. She smiled and introduced herself, Satsuki. They hadn't seen each other in 6 years. Naoto told her he hadn't forgiven her for ruining the garden. She apologized, but only for her to follow him. She said she had something important to say, but he tried to escape. When she finally let go, he ran for his life. A few blocks away, he picked up Suzu and rushed home, not wanting to be caught. At home, Suzu asked who the girl was, but Naoto just said it was no one. Then Suzu told him what she really wanted for her birthday, a garden where they could grow vegetables together. Embarrassed, Naoto tried to explain they had no space, but Suzu said he could just buy land. Suddenly, Aunt Tameo popped out of nowhere and offered her unused backyard for the garden. Naoto checked it out. It was wild and overgrown, but he agreed to try for Suzu's sake. As he looked around, Satsuki jumped out holding a gardening hoe, scaring him half to death. Naoto was shocked. He asked what's she doing in the backyard. She said she had remembered something she needed to tell him. But Naoto was annoyed. He didn't understand on why she kept following him. All he wanted was to finally start a peaceful life with Suzu. Satsuki, though, insisted he had misunderstood everything. When words didn't work, she acted instead. She suddenly pulled him in and kissed him full on. At that exact moment, Ishihara peeked into the backyard and saw Naoto and Satsuki kissing on the ground like a scene from a drama. And Satsuki didn't stop there. She kept kissing him over and over. And truthfully, Naoto wasn't sure he hated it. He woke up later in bed, confused. Aunt Tameo stormed in, calling him a pervert, and warned him not to mess around in her yard again. The next morning, Naoto tried to tell Suzu that nothing was going on with the blonde girl. But Suzu, clearly jealous, ignored him and ran off to work on the garden by herself. Naoto wondered why Suzu didn't remember Satsuki at all. At school, Yukari wondered if she had really seen Naoto kissing Satsuki. When Naoto showed up and apologized for missing the meeting, Yukari seemed distant. Just then, Satsuki appeared, cheerful as ever, teasing Naoto about his interest in girls with certain features, clearly referring to Yukari. Embarrassed, Naoto dragged Satsuki away. On the balcony, she returned the gardening hoe she had borrowed 6 years ago. She reminded him of the times they spent in Shinshu, how they became close friends after he offered her a tomato. His mom once said the girl had a crush on him, but then she destroyed the garden and vanished. In the present, Naoto asked her why. She still refused to explain but said she wanted to truly apologize. She even suggested he could punish her in a naughty way, but Naoto yelled at her to stop messing around. Feeling guilty, she left. Later, Toki asked Naoto to help with something. On the way home, Naoto noticed Yukari avoiding him. She used to be his comfort in high school, but now everything felt messy. Then Satsuki showed up carrying Suzu, who had hurt her knee. Naoto panicked and grabbed his hoe, but Suzu explained that Satsuki had only helped her and even joined in the garden work. Suzu said she remembered Satsuki from their old house in Shinshu and didn't mind them being friends. That evening, Satsuki walked home with them. She claimed that the garden in Shinshu had actually belonged to her before the Wataris moved in. Before she could explain more, Yukari showed up and asked to talk alone. The next day, she and Naoto met at the supermarket to buy supplies for the school garden. Suzu and Satsuki stayed behind to take care of their own garden. At the store, Yukari asked if Naoto was dating Satsuki. He said no and tried to confess his feelings, but couldn't. As they left the store, Suzu suddenly appeared, clearly upset. Seeing her big brother with another girl, she became jealous and started scolding him. To calm her down, Naoto gave her a special gift, a blue gardening hoe he picked out just for her. He knew Suzu didn't like pink or anything too girly. While they were talking, Satsuki quietly slipped away without saying anything. Then, out of nowhere, Yukari blurted out that she loved Naoto. She said it was because of how kind he was to his sister. Realizing what she'd said, she panicked and tried to take it back. But she was so embarrassed, she ended up running away. Suzu looked around and asked where Satsuki had gone. Back home, Suzu proudly showed off her new hoe to Aunt Tamo. Meanwhile, Naoto stepped outside, wondering if Satsuki had somehow wandered into the backyard again. Sure enough, he saw a flash of blonde hair in the garden, just like that summer 6 years ago. Satsuki welcomed him back and asked how his date went. Naoto explained, awkwardly, that he was only with Ishihara because the rest of the group didn't show up. Satsuki laughed and said she wanted to go on a date too, but quickly brushed it off as a joke. Still, Naoto told himself not to fall for her tricks again. He didn't want to feel the same hurt he felt when she left years ago. Looking at the yard, he noticed it was strangely clean. Satsuki casually said she had kept her promise, not by pulling out all the weeds, but by digging everything up all at once. Without warning, she started taking off her sweaty clothes right there in the yard. Naoto quickly stopped her just in time. But then, as always, Aunt Tameo opened the door at the worst possible moment. Seeing the two of them like that, Aunt Tameo lost her temper. She shouted at Naoto, gave him a harsh scolding, and hit him with full force, making it very clear she was done putting up with any of this nonsense in her house. After Aunt Tameo stormed off, Naoto and Satsuki stood up and quietly moved away from each other. The whole situation left Naoto feeling uneasy. To clear his head, he decided to take Suzu for a walk and told Satsuki to go home. But instead of leaving, Satsuki followed closely behind them, saying her house was in the same direction. As they walked, Satsuki casually asked if they were moving again. Naoto, surprised she noticed, admitted that they might. He said he was hoping he and Suzu could finally settle down somewhere for a while. When he told her that his personal life wasn't her concern, Satsuki grabbed his tie and made him face her. Calmly, she said she already knew what had happened to his family. Though it made him uncomfortable, Naoto started to open up. As the sun went down, he told her about how he and Suzu ended up living with Aunt Tameo. Their parents' marriage was never accepted by either side of the family, and after they died, no one really wanted to take them in. They had been passed around from one reluctant relative to another until they ended up with Tameo. Satsuki interrupted, saying that maybe Tameo cared more than she showed. After all, she let them use her backyard to start a garden. Then Satsuki pulled out a few seed packets and handed them to Naoto. Before leaving, she told him that if he and Suzu ever got kicked out, they could come live with her instead. Later that evening, Suzu woke up and realized Tameo was still upset, especially since Naoto hadn't come home yet. She held Naoto's hand and made him promise that wherever he went, he would always take her with him. Meanwhile, Tameo had just finished her shower and was looking for her glasses, only to find her cat had run off with them. While chasing the cat, she accidentally ran into Naoto, who had just come home to apologize. Embarrassed, she ran back into the bathroom. From outside the door, Naoto got on his knees and begged her to let them stay a little longer so he and Suzu could finish the garden. He said it would take time before the vegetables could grow, and he wanted to stay at least long enough to see it happen. Tameo suddenly opened the door, now fully dressed, and asked for her glasses. After putting them on, she bluntly asked if Satsuki was his girlfriend. Naoto quickly said no, she was just a childhood friend. He also added that he had no plans to start any relationship because his only focus was Suzu. Just then, Suzu came into the room and asked if Naoto was done apologizing. Tameo looked at her and told Naoto that if he really cared about Suzu, he should focus on the garden instead of messing around with girls. Naoto smiled. Those words made it clear they were allowed to stay. Excited, Suzu asked if Tamayo would help them with the garden. Tamayo refused, saying she had no plans to do any hard work. Naoto found that odd, remembering how their father once said he and Tamayo used to garden together. At the mention of her brother, Tamayo's mood changed completely. She snapped at him, warning him never to bring up her brother again. Both Naoto and Suzu were left wondering what happened between her and their father. The next day, Satsuki joined them on the walk to school. Suzu happily talked to her about everything that had happened, while Naoto silently questioned why Satsuki kept tagging along. Satsuki noticed his gaze and playfully teased him, making the morning feel lighthearted and peaceful for all three of them. A few days later, the seeds they planted started to sprout. Naoto explained that they were growing a special type of radish that would be ready in about 20 days. Then he brought up a more serious topic. He had found Suzu's test results on her desk and was worried about her grades going down. Suzu suggested he tutor her. With no other choice, Naoto agreed, but not before scolding her a little and reminding her that she needed to learn to be more independent. She didn't seem to take it seriously and clung to him, saying he would always be there to take care of her. At school, Naoto remembered that midterms were coming up. Yukari offered to study with him, but he turned her down, thinking he might slow her down. She kindly asked him to at least think about it and then walk off with her friend. Naoto tried not to overthink it, but his friend Toki teased him about how close Yukari had been lately. Naoto insisted she was just being polite, but his red face gave him away. After Toki left, Naoto's smile faded. He knew Suzu might not be happy if he spent time alone with Yukari. That afternoon it started pouring rain. Naoto didn't have an umbrella and watched as everyone else left school. Just then, Satsuki showed up and handed him an extra umbrella. When he asked why she hadn't walked with them that morning, she joked that she didn't want to interrupt his time with Suzu and had followed them from 5 meters behind. She teased him about sharing an umbrella, not realizing that Yukari was secretly watching from behind the lockers. Toki also saw everything. Back home, Naoto started to panic, realizing Suzu might have gotten stuck at school without an umbrella. He looked around her room for a raincoat, but instead found a crumpled-up test paper in her closet with a perfect score. He was confused. Why would she hide something like that? Before he could think more, Suzu walked in. Startled, Naoto quickly stuffed the paper into his pocket. Suzu casually said she had walked a classmate home because he forgot his umbrella. Naoto's expression changed and his voice grew sharp. Suzu noticed and asked what was wrong, but he brushed it off and quickly left the room. Out in the rain, Naoto felt guilty. He hadn't praised Suzu for her perfect score or her kindness. He realized he had always thought of her as someone who needed him for everything. But maybe she was becoming more independent, and that made him feel strange. Then he saw Satsuki, soaked from the rain. He realized she had lied. She only had one umbrella and gave it to him. He felt worse, like everyone was hiding things from him. Maybe even Suzu had been pretending to be helpless so he could feel needed. Satsuki noticed his troubled expression and gently reached out. Naoto said he was fine, but noticed she was still soaking wet. Quietly, he took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. He walked her to a rundown apartment nearby and was surprised that she lived so close. When she tried to open the door, the knob fell off. Naoto wondered what kind of parents left her in a place like that. Satsuki told him to go home and warm up, but when he didn't move, she pulled him inside. Naoto hesitated, saying he had to return to Suzu. But Satsuki said Suzu was old enough to be alone. Then she accused him of always ignoring his own feelings and building his whole life around Suzu's needs. Naoto lost his temper. He grabbed Satsuki by the shoulders and pushed her against the wall, yelling at her for saying things she didn't understand. Her silence hurt more than he expected. He turned away and muttered that she would never understand his bond with Suzu. Then he left, leaving Satsuki standing alone. As he walked in the rain, she sat down on the floor, blushing and whispering that she did understand him. Naoto kept walking, thinking deeply. Maybe it was time to stop living only for Suzu. Maybe then he could finally start thinking about Yukari. When he got home, Suzu ran to him, blaming herself for what happened earlier. Naoto gently calmed her down and gave her sweets to make her feel better. He promised to come home earlier next time. Suzu teared up and reminded him about his promise to tutor her, saying she wasn't smart like other kids. That's when Naoto pulled out the perfect test paper. Suzu's face changed. She grabbed the paper, crumpled it again, and threw it away. Naoto picked it up and told her she didn't need help with math. But Suzu insisted that the score was a one-time thing. She still needed him for everything else. Before Naoto could answer, the room started spinning. His legs gave out and he collapsed. Suzu panicked and ran to call Aunt Tamayo. The next day, word spread at school that Naoto was absent. At home, Suzu refused to leave his side, even though Naoto warned she might get sick too. He kept trying to convince her to go to school, and eventually she agreed. By noon, Naoto woke up and sensed something was off. Sure enough, Satsuki was lying in bed right next to him, staring like nothing was strange. He tried to scold her, asking how she even got inside, but she ignored the question and apologized for getting him sick. She offered him medicine, but it turned out to be a children's suppository. Naoto stared at it in horror, shocked that she remembered such a weird detail about him. She explained it was the kind his mother used to give him. He told her to go to school, but she calmly said school only had morning classes and it was already past noon. She also mentioned trying several ways to wake him up, teasingly hinting they were unusual. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. Naoto struggled to his feet and opened the door to find Yukari looking worried. Even though he was stressed, he let her inside. She asked to use the kitchen to make him something warm, and he agreed. The moment Yukari left to cook, Satsuki got up and said she would go. She didn't like seeing him with Yukari. But before she left, she sat on top of him and joked that maybe he wanted her to stay. Just then, Yukari called from outside the door saying lunch was ready. Panicking, Naoto quickly pulled Satsuki under the blanket and dove in after her. Yukari came into the room with a warm smile, placing a bowl of food beside him, completely unaware of the blushing Satsuki hidden under the covers. Naoto lay frozen, heart racing, wondering how he would get out of this mess. Naoto still couldn't believe he had agreed to this. Hiding under the blanket had been Satsuki's idea. Somehow, in her mind, it had seemed like a perfectly normal thing to do. Things only got worse when Yukari, who had come to visit, noticed a box of suppositories lying nearby. Naoto panicked and quickly blurted out that they were Satsuki's, trying to sound casual about it. Meanwhile, under the blanket, Satsuki was squirming to get comfortable. She didn't seem embarrassed at all. In fact, she held Naoto tightly, clearly enjoying the situation. Naoto, on the other hand, was sweating nervously and praying Yukari wouldn't notice anything weird. Yukari leaned in to check his forehead. She thought he might still have a fever, but thankfully didn't realize why he was actually heating up. She kindly reminded him to eat and drink water before heading out, finally giving Naoto some relief. As soon as Yukari left, Satsuki stretched under the blanket and smiled proudly, like she had won something. Naoto just sat there, frozen, still shaken from the whole experience. Later, on her way home, Yukari started to feel uneasy. She had visited Naoto to check on him, but Satsuki had clearly been there before her. Yukari told herself it was fine. Naoto had said they were just childhood friends. Still, something about it didn't sit right with her. She paused by a small shrine and prayed silently for Naoto's health. Back at home, Naoto had changed into fresh clothes. He sat down and opened the food Yukari had made for him earlier. Wanting to feel thankful, he took a big spoonful, only to instantly regret it. The rice was overcooked and had a strange metallic taste. Even so, he kept eating. It was from Yukari after all. Outside, in the garden, Satsuki was taking care of the plants while Suzu watched. After a while, Satsuki called Suzu over to help. As they worked together, Suzu started talking about how worried she was about Naoto. While they chatted, Suzu accidentally pulled out a basil plant, thinking it was a weed. It had grown too close to the tomatoes. Satsuki gently corrected her, explaining that basil and tomatoes are actually companion plants. They help each other grow and protect one another from bugs. Suzu listened quietly, thinking deeply about what Satsuki said. Then, out of nowhere, Suzu asked Satsuki about something from the past. She remembered that years ago, Satsuki had ruined their garden. Naoto had been very upset, and Suzu had even tried to chase after Satsuki to ask why. But she had stopped when she saw Satsuki talking to a strange man before disappearing. Suzu asked who the man was, but Satsuki said there had been no one with her. She quickly changed the subject and asked if Suzu had ever told Naoto about that day. Then she admitted she had destroyed the garden because she was angry. She and Naoto had argued, and she had acted out. She said it was something she truly regretted. Suzu suddenly remembered how she and Naoto had cleaned up the garden afterward. She had planned to tell him everything about what happened. But when the chance came, she didn't. Instead, she used the situation to get closer to her brother. She wanted to be someone he could rely on and share something special with him. The next morning, Suzu was surprised to see Naoto already up and dressed. He said he was feeling much better and joked that Yukari's porridge had cured him, though honestly, he couldn't remember much after eating it. Naoto also noticed that Suzu had gotten ready for school all by herself. She said she wanted to be a little more independent now, but she added that she still wanted to depend on him for some things. At school, Naoto wanted to thank Yukari properly, but she was always busy or surrounded by classmates. Some guys warned Naoto not to get his hopes up. They said Yukari was polite but distant, and no one had ever gotten close to her. Toki joined in and mentioned that he and Yukari had known each other since childhood. He said that Yukari always ended up in strange situations, even though she seemed calm and quiet. Naoto realized that being beautiful probably came with its own problems, Later on his way home, Naoto saw Yukari turning down a group of boys who had confessed their feelings, but she noticed Naoto watching and walked over to him. He finally got a chance to thank her for visiting him when he was sick. Just as he was about to leave, Yukari surprised him by inviting him to a study session. They found a quiet corner in the library and began to study together. After a while, Naoto asked her something that had been bothering him. He wanted to know why Yukari was being so nice to him. Yukari smiled and said part of it was because he was a transfer student. That made Naoto feel a bit disappointed. But then Yukari added there was another reason. She said they had actually met once before he transferred to the school. Back then, Yukari had stayed late at school for her club duties. Wanting to change out of her uniform, she had gone into an empty classroom. Just then, Naoto had suddenly burst in, not noticing her state of dress, and had started asking questions. He was looking for Suzu and had been too focused to see anything else. Yukari said she never forgot that moment. Even though she had been caught off guard, she was surprised by how worried Naoto was for his sister. That memory stayed with her, even if he didn't remember it at all. Naoto felt terrible after hearing what Yukari had gone through. He didn't remember anything about it, but he admitted it probably happened. Yukari, her cheeks red, told him she admired how much he cared for Suzu. She said he felt different from the other boys, most only cared about girls for shallow reasons. She even mentioned the group of guys near the station she had rejected, calling them pushy and scary. That was why Naoto stood out. He was genuine and kind. Naoto suddenly felt a chill. Yukari looked like she wanted to say something more, but instead, she apologized for rambling and left. As she walked out of the library, she saw Satsuki standing nearby. Yukari wondered if Naoto and Satsuki had made plans to meet, but Satsuki casually said she was just waiting for him because she felt like it. Yukari nodded and walked off without saying anything else. Later, Naoto shared everything Yukari had told him with Toki while eating ramen. Naoto thought Yukari was just letting him down gently and didn't want him to see her in a romantic way. Toki disagreed and said it could mean something else, but Naoto didn't get the hint. He decided he would do his best to stay pure in Yukari's eyes so they could keep being friends. Suddenly, Satsuki appeared and said he shouldn't force himself and should just be his true self. That night, Naoto looked at the notes he and Yukari had written together and thought about her words. His classmates' teasing echoed in his mind. He tried to ignore it, but he couldn't stop imagining Yukari's face. Then Satsuki's face suddenly popped into his head, which made him feel even more confused. He remembered the blanket incident from the day before and thought how nice it would have been if Yukari had been there instead of Satsuki. Just then, he noticed Suzu, who had been sleeping next to him, wide awake and staring at him with an annoyed, disappointed glare. Naoto froze in panic and quickly said he needed to go to the bathroom. Meanwhile, Yukari was showering at her house, but her thoughts drifted back to what Satsuki had said. The way Satsuki acted so naturally around Naoto made her uneasy. Yukari wondered if she really was just a childhood friend to him or maybe something more. Still, she chose to believe in Naoto and told herself to be braver so she could confess her feelings someday. The next morning, Naoto was watering plants in the yard. He looked exhausted. Suzu, working on the vegetable patch, complained to Satsuki that Naoto had been acting weird since yesterday. Curious, Satsuki tried to talk to him, but when Naoto turned around, he accidentally sprayed her with cold water from the hose. Soaked, Satsuki sat on the ground while Naoto panicked and backed away, telling himself over and over not to look. At school later, Satsuki teased Naoto about his distracted behavior, saying it was probably Yukari related. She also mentioned that because Naoto had sprayed her with cold water that morning, she got soaked through her clothes. Naoto then realized what that might mean. She could be wearing nothing underneath at school. He panicked, but Satsuki just smiled and said she'd be fine. It was only exam day and all she needed to do was sit. Then Yukari showed up and greeted Naoto. He immediately tried to act normal and claim he wasn't talking to Satsuki, but Satsuki had already left. Naoto kept glancing at her skirt nervously, which Yukari noticed. Wanting to get his attention, Yukari suddenly invited him to hang out after exams, and even said he could bring Suzu. Just then, a strong wind blew through the hallway and lifted a few girls' skirts. Without thinking, Naoto ran up and hugged Satsuki tightly to keep her skirt from flying up. Everyone stared. Yukari froze, thinking it looked like a bold, romantic move. Realizing what had happened, Naoto quickly let go and tried to explain, but it was too late. Yukari's face turned dark, and she rushed off without saying a word. Naoto dropped to the floor in despair, blaming Satsuki for ruining his moment with Yukari. Satsuki calmly explained she had borrowed some of Naoto's clothes, so he didn't need to worry. But she still thanked him for trying to protect her. Naoto felt even worse. A week passed, and Yukari barely spoke to him. Naoto complained about everything to Toki and Satsuki. That's when Toki revealed a new problem. There was now a rumor going around school that Naoto and Satsuki were dating. Naoto felt hopeless. He was supposed to have had fun with Yukari after exams, but everything had gone wrong. Seeing how upset he was, Toki came up with a plan. He announced that they were all going to the beach that weekend to cheer up. After school, Naoto was deep in thought. The upcoming beach trip with his class should have been exciting, but he felt uneasy. Things between him and Yukari were still awkward, and he didn't know how to act around her for 2 whole days. On top of that, he was worried about his little sister, Suzu. He hated the idea of leaving her alone. After thinking it over, Naoto decided to just bring Suzu along on the trip. That way, he wouldn't have to worry about her being lonely at home. But when he got back to the house, Suzu greeted him with unexpected news. She had her own school trip to the beach, and it was on the same weekend. She looked happy, but also a little sad that they wouldn't be together. Naoto, on the other hand, felt relieved. He smiled and told her it was great news. They both realized someone had to take care of their garden while they were away, so they agreed to ask their aunt, Tamio, for help. Before heading off to pack, Suzu asked Naoto to promise not to forget her during their time apart. He smiled and promised. Then, looking up at him, she asked him to take her shopping for a new swimsuit the next day. Naoto hesitated but eventually agreed. The next morning, he already regretted saying yes. Luckily, Satsuki offered to come with them, saying she needed his swimsuit too. Naoto didn't really enjoy the idea of shopping with her, but it still seemed better than going alone. As both of them walked through the hallway together, chatting and laughing, Yukari happened to spot them from across the locker. She paused, feeling a strange twist in her chest. Toki, who was standing nearby, noticed her expression and casually asked if she wanted to go talk to them. Yukari didn't respond right away. She had heard a rumor at school that Naoto and Satsuki were dating. She tried to ignore it, but seeing them together now made her doubt everything. Toki then asked if Naoto had ever said they were dating. Yukari shook her head. Toki reminded her not to trust gossip unless she heard it from Naoto himself. He also pointed out how Yukari used to be in middle school, brave and honest when confused. After thinking for a moment, Yukari nodded, thanked him, and ran to catch up with Naoto and the others. At the department store, Naoto was already overwhelmed by the large swimwear section. Satsuki and Suzu immediately split off to look at different suits. Soon both returned with revealing designs and asked Naoto what he thought. Embarrassed, he told them to just pick whatever they liked. Satsuki smirked and teased it by holding up an even bolder option. Suzu smiled shyly and asked if she looked cute, but Naoto quickly turned away, flustered, and went off to find his own beachwear. Nearby, Yukari had arrived but hesitated to approach them. Instead, she stayed out of sight and quietly observed. A friendly sales clerk asked if she needed help. Yukari nervously said she wanted something simple, but after seeing Satsuki's bold choices, she changed her mind. She asked for something revealing. The clerk, excited to help, handed her a 2-piece that fit perfectly. Yukari blushed and asked to see a different one. The clerk offered to help her find something better. Then, leaning in, the clerk asked if Yukari was shopping to impress someone. Yukari didn't answer, but her face gave it away. She described someone tall and serious, which made the clerk even more eager. The clerk even brought out clip and hair extensions to help Yukari look more mature. Soon, Yukari stood in front of the mirror wearing a flattering swimsuit and longer hair. She was surprised by how different she looked. At that moment, Naoto passed by, saw her, and didn't recognize her. He paused, confused, before walking away. Back in the changing area, Suzu called out for help with her straps. Naoto pulled open a curtain, thinking it was Suzu's booth. To his horror, it was Satsuki inside, and she had just stepped out of her swimsuit. They both froze. Then Satsuki yanked the curtain shut and screamed. Naoto stumbled back, quickly apologizing. Moments later, Suzu stepped out, smiling, unaware of what had just happened. Satsuki stormed out of the booth, red-faced and angry. Naoto followed her, trying to explain. He gently grabbed her wrist. She turned to him with a mix of anger and embarrassment and muttered softly that he was an idiot. Naoto was surprised. Satsuki usually didn't get flustered even when teasing him. He mentioned that. She looked away and said it felt different when it wasn't on purpose. Nearby, Yukari had finished her purchase and spotted the two of them talking. She hid behind a wall, not sure what she was feeling. She had seen enough for one day. On the train ride home, Satsuki sat across from Naoto and Suzu. She looked thoughtful and asked why he never spoke badly about her. If he did, people might stop misunderstanding their relationship. Naoto simply shrugged and said it was their problem, not anyone else's. Suzu, half asleep, murmured that she was thirsty. Then she turned to Satsuki and asked her to come sit beside them. Satsuki smiled and said it was okay. She would stay where she was and jump in if Naoto ever really needed her. Naoto wasn't sure what she meant, whether it was an apology or something more. Their relationship was complicated. They weren't exactly friends, but they weren't strangers either. They had once been very close, but something had gone wrong. He hadn't fully forgiven her yet, but part of him didn't want to let her go. When they got off the train, Yukari was waiting for them. She didn't hesitate and asked if Naoto and Satsuki were dating. Naoto tried to explain that they were just childhood friends, but Yukari didn't believe him. She brought up the time she saw them kiss in the garden. Naoto panicked. Satsuki stepped in and smiled calmly. She said it had just been a kiss. Then, without warning, she leaned forward and kissed Yukari lightly on the cheek. She explained that it didn't mean anything. She kissed people all the time, boys, girls, anyone. She admitted she had kissed Naoto too, but said it didn't mean anything romantic. Yukari still looked confused, but slowly nodded. Suzu tugged on Naoto's sleeve and asked for a drink, so they all headed to a vending machine. Yukari tried to calm down, telling herself the kiss didn't mean anything. Still, her heart was racing. As she turned to leave, Naoto called her name. He told her again that he and Satsuki were just old friends. Then he smiled and said he was really looking forward to the beach trip with her. Yukari blushed and softly replied that she was too. The next day at the beach, everyone was excited. Satsuki was amazed by the ocean. Naoto, however, kept sneaking glances at Yukari. In the changing room, Yukari's friends complimented her new look. Yukari blushed and looked down at her feet. She hoped Naoto would like it. Naoto stood under the shade, thinking about Suzu. He missed her already, but he also knew this trip was a chance to get closer to Yukari. As he looked around, he spotted her laughing with a group of classmates. He wanted to talk to her, but wasn't sure how. Just then, he noticed Satsuki arguing with a guy. One of their classmates explained that Satsuki had been getting hit on all morning. Naoto quickly walked over and grabbed her by the jacket, pulling her away. He tried to scold her, but she just smiled and asked what he thought of her swimsuit. Naoto looked away, flustered. She sighed and asked why he wasn't spending time with Yukari. When Naoto asked if she was planning to swim, Satsuki admitted she didn't know how. She had always skipped swim class. This was her first real beach trip. She had never even gone with her family. Naoto was surprised. Even after all these years, there were things he didn't know about her. Satsuki said she wanted to try swimming today. Naoto encouraged her, but warned her not to go alone. Just then, Toki walked up and handed Naoto a note from their group. It was a list of things to buy. He said Yukari would be joining him. Naoto took the note and walked off, not noticing the smile Satsuki gave him as she watched him go. When Naoto met Yukari at the shop, he was so nervous he could barely look her in the eye. Yukari misunderstood, thinking maybe he didn't like her swimsuit. To break the silence, Naoto unfolded the paper, but all it said was, "Go have lunch together." They both realized Toki had set them up. And for once, Naoto didn't mind at all. While Naoto and Yukari were off doing their errand, Satsuki and Toki ended up spending some time together by the beach. The others were playing or relaxing, but Satsuki stayed off to the side, quietly watching everything from a distance. She admitted to Toki that she didn't usually get along with other girls, which was why she preferred to keep to herself. Curious about her quiet attitude, Toki asked if she had feelings for Naoto. Satsuki didn't deny it. She admitted she liked him, but quickly added that she had no interest in being his girlfriend. Her feelings weren't about wanting to date him. They were something quieter, something she didn't expect anything from. Toki seemed satisfied with her answer. He told her that in that case, he continued to support Naoto and Yukari. He went on to say that he had also made a decision. He no longer wanted to pursue Yukari as a girlfriend. Whatever feelings he had were fading now, and he felt at peace with that. Meanwhile, Naoto and Yukari walked side by side through rows of colorful food stalls. The salty breeze from the sea mixed with the smell of grilled food and sweets. They wandered slowly, trying to decide what to eat. Naoto wondered aloud if Yukari might want something light and sweet, like shaved ice. Yukari smiled at the suggestion and joked about how it would probably dye her tongue the funny color. Then playfully, she stuck her tongue out, catching Naoto off guard. His heart skipped a beat, and he quickly looked away, trying not to blush. After a moment of thought, Yukari pointed out that they should try something with more protein first. She mentioned they could always come back later for shaved ice, and maybe even share one together. Naoto nodded, still feeling lightheaded from her playful gesture. A little while later, Yukari returned holding several sticks of yakitori. The vendor had given her extra, so they found a quiet place to sit on some nearby stone steps. They ate in silence for a while, enjoying the warm, flavorful food and the peaceful moment. Naoto felt incredibly lucky to be sitting there beside her. The sun was still high, but the shadows were beginning to stretch across the beach. Their meal was occasionally interrupted by people walking past them. A few guys glanced at Yukari's way and made side comments. Some even tried to talk to her, hinting that she should ditch Naoto and come hang out with him instead. Yukari tried to ignore them, but Naoto could tell it made her uncomfortable. Sensing the mood change, Naoto gently suggested they head back to their group. Without thinking much of it, he took her hand to guide her through the crowd. Yukari didn't resist at first, but after a few steps, she nervously asked him to let go. Naoto immediately did, apologizing and then complimenting her swimsuit, his words stumbling out awkwardly. He quickly added that he hoped he didn't sound weird or creepy. To his surprise, Yukari smiled and said it made her happy to hear that from him. For a moment, everything felt right again. Just then, a voice called out from nearby. Yukari turned toward the sound and recognized Fujioka, a senior from their school. He approached them casually, spoke a few kind words, and complimented her. Though the exchange was brief, something about it left Yukari uneasy. She didn't say anything at first, but her smile faded as she watched him walk away. After a few moments of silence, Yukari told Naoto that she wanted to go back to the hotel. Back at the beach, Toki began to worry. It was getting late, and Naoto and Yukari still hadn't returned. He glanced around at the others, wondering if he should go look for them. Satsuki reassured him, saying Naoto was probably just being his usual self, easily distracted. But even she glanced toward the road with a concerned look in her eyes. While Naoto was hanging out with his classmates, some of the girls mentioned that Yukari had once dated a senior named Fujioka. They said the two broke up when he graduated high school. The news left Naoto feeling a little uncomfortable, even though he tried not to show it. When he brought up to Toki, his friend suggested that instead of guessing, he should ask Yukari directly. Later that day, Naoto walked back to the hotel, feeling a little uneasy. As he approached the entrance, he spotted Fujioka looking around. Fujioka noticed him too and asked if he had seen Yukari. Naoto replied politely that Yukari had already gone back to her room and suggested Fujioka ask the hotel staff for help if needed. The two introduced themselves properly, and Fujioka even gave Naoto a small pack of snacks before walking into the hotel. Even though Fujioka seemed friendly and polite, Naoto couldn't help but feel intimidated. Fujioka had the kind of confident, charming personality that made Naoto wonder if Yukari might still have feelings for him. Just then, he heard Satsuki's voice behind him. He suddenly remembered that he had promised her they'd go swimming earlier. He quickly apologized for forgetting. Satsuki accepted his apology, then playfully took his hand and placed it on her chest, calling it a gift to cheer him up. She smiled and walked into the hotel, leaving Naoto red-faced and flustered outside. Meanwhile, Fujioka had found Yukari and the two walked through the hotel's garden. As they talked, Fujioka said he wanted a fresh start and invited her to have dinner with him. Yukari agreed, though she seemed unsure. After he left, Satsuki approached Yukari and told her that Toki said their classmates would be having dinner together. She also mentioned that Naoto had been feeling confused and upset about her and Fujioka. As they talked, the two overheard some boys gossiping about Satsuki. A few said she seemed easy, but Naoto suddenly jumped in and defended her, saying people shouldn't judge her like that. Satsuki blushed at his words but didn't let Yukari know they had overheard everything. Yukari then told Satsuki she wouldn't be joining the group dinner. When Satsuki asked if it was because of Fujioka, Yukari calmly said he wasn't her boyfriend, and in fact, she had never dated anyone. She walked away, remembering how she had once turned Fujioka down in high school, though no one believed her back then. Later, as the class gathered for dinner, Satsuki informed the group that Yukari wouldn't be coming. The girls were quick to assume she was off reconnecting with Fujioka, but Satsuki told them that Yukari had denied ever dating him. Before anyone could argue, Toki came in and told the group the rest of their classmates had already gone to the restaurant. Naoto, who had overheard the conversation, became even more curious. Something about Yukari and Fujioka's past didn't feel right. At dinner, Yukari thanked Fujioka for the evening, but painful memories began to return. Even though she had turned him down, Fujioka had acted as if they were dating. People assumed they were a couple, and Yukari had been too afraid to speak up and correct them. Just before his graduation, she tried again to reject him, but he promised to wait for her and see her again one day. Now Yukari brought up that winter day. She told him she hadn't expected him to follow through, especially since he never contacted her afterward. Fujioka explained that he wanted to wait until she finished school, but Yukari confessed she liked someone else. Fujioka then asked if that person liked only her. His words made her feel uneasy, and she suddenly got up and left the restaurant. Back at the hotel, Naoto and Satsuki hadn't joined the others for dinner. Naoto admitted he felt helpless. Soon, Fujioka walked in alone and handed them a note Yukari had left at the restaurant. She wrote that she wanted to walk back alone. After reading it, Satsuki said Yukari probably didn't like Fujioka and couldn't stand being near him anymore. Just then, Toki arrived to check on them. Naoto told him about Yukari and Toki offered to help. He tried calling her, but Fujioka said she wasn't answering. Surprisingly, Yukari picked up Toki's call. He told them she took a wrong turn, but was heading back. Then turning to Fujioka, he firmly said Yukari felt uncomfortable and asked him to leave. Fujioka agreed and left quietly. Afterward, Toki admitted he had lied. Yukari wasn't coming back yet, but he had learned where she was. He gave Naoto his phone and told him to go find her. Naoto hesitated, unsure what to say. He glanced at Satsuki, but Toki insisted he go alone. Naoto finally left to look for her. Meanwhile, Satsuki, annoyed by Naoto's uncertainty, went off to take a bath, feeling frustrated that he kept turning to her for help with his problems about another girl. While Naoto searched, he called Yukari using Toki's phone. Yukari answered, surprised to hear his voice. She told him not to worry and that she just wanted to be alone for a while. What she didn't know was that Naoto had already found her and was standing nearby. He gently asked her if she could share what she was feeling. As he spoke, Yukari finally looked up and saw him. Naoto walked closer, saying he didn't like seeing her sad. Yukari brought up Satsuki, saying she still had doubts about him dating her. She nearly slipped and revealed her true feelings to Naoto, but instead, she turned to run away. She tripped and fell, breaking the heel of her shoe. Naoto rushed over and saw that she was crying. He offered her a piggyback ride, saying he was used to carrying Suzu anyway. Embarrassed, Yukari said she was heavy, but Naoto reassured her. As he carried her back to the hotel, he asked if something about Fujioka had made her uncomfortable. Yukari asked to be put down. Once on her feet, she explained that she and Fujioka had never dated. Everyone just assumed they had, and she had been too afraid to speak up. She admitted she wanted to change and be more honest from now on. She also said she wanted to confess her feelings to the person she truly loved. Naoto, unaware she was talking about him, encouraged her to do so and promised to support her no matter what. Yukari then told him she admired him, especially after seeing how he defended Satsuki. She said she wished she had that kind of courage. She was about to confess again when suddenly, Fujioka arrived with some classmates. Shocked, Yukari hid behind Naoto, who noticed how uncomfortable she looked. He stepped forward and told everyone that Yukari had never dated Fujioka. The crowd went silent, then began whispering. Fujioka smiled and claimed they were still a couple. He turned to Yukari, expecting her to agree. But this time, Yukari stood tall. She said they had never dated and that she never wanted to see him again. When Fujioka tried to grab her wrist, Satsuki appeared and kicked him away. She told him off and threatened to call the police for stalking. Fujioka panicked and left after angrily threatening to report her. Later, Yukari's friends apologized for believing Fujioka all this time. She admitted it was partly her fault too. Toki remained worried, but Yukari promised she would be stronger next time. Meanwhile, Satsuki and Naoto sat together. He brought her some rice balls, saying they had both missed dinner. As they ate, he joked about her becoming popular. But Satsuki stopped him. She said she wasn't interested in anyone else, only him. She wanted to understand why he was still kind to her even after what happened 6 years ago. Then, without warning, she kissed him. Quietly, she asked him not to be nice to her anymore, because if he was, she might end up taking something important to him again. Naoto was finally back home from his beach trip, but his conversation with Satsuki still lingered fresh in his mind. He could not shake the thought of what she had been referring to. His mind drifted back to the day before she had wrecked the garden, when she had come over to hang out. They had been sitting together, watching a romantic drama on TV. In the show, the main couple decided to run away together, and Naoto, feeling impulsive, had suggested that he and Satsuki should do the same. They had stepped out into the warm daylight and started walking through their quiet little town. The journey had been longer than they anticipated, and Naoto had eventually noticed that Satsuki's steps were slowing and her face had grown pale from fatigue. Still, she refused to admit she was tired. Instead, she asked him to take her even farther away. He had agreed, and the two had kept walking, making a promise that they would stay together no matter how far they went. Their adventure ended when the sun sank low and the street lamps flickered on. Returning home, they found Naoto's parents waiting. Since it was already late, his parents offered to drive Satsuki home, but she declined and turned to leave on her own. When Naoto called after her to say goodbye, she looked back at him, but the memory blurred in his mind. He could no longer recall the expression she had worn. He was still trying to piece it together when Suzu ran up and threw her arms around him, delighted to see him home again. They lay together on the engawa, enjoying the soft breeze and the quiet company. Suzu looked out at the overgrown garden and casually mentioned that they would clean it up the next day. Naoto wondered silently if Satsuki would come to help the way she used to. The next morning, Yukari stood before her mirror, rehearsing how she would confess her feelings to Naoto. She became flustered by her own reflection, but quickly reminded herself of the promise she had made to Satsuki, that she would finally tell him. Yet the weight of her nerves made her realize she probably wasn't ready after all. Elsewhere, Satsuki stepped out of her apartment and was startled to see Naoto standing right in front of her. He asked why she had not come to help in the garden that morning. She responded with a sharp question of her own, wanting to know if that was truly the only reason he had sought her out. Naoto faltered but insisted she should keep her promises, especially since she had been there every morning before school until now. Satsuki studied him quietly, then remarked that she had expected him to bring up the fact she had kissed him 2 days ago. She wanted to know if he had felt anything from those kisses. When he admitted that he had, she pressed further, asking if he actually liked being kissed by her. She confessed that she had always thought he harbored resentment toward her. Naoto told her that he did not hate her. He admitted that he had been upset about the garden, but more than that, he had been hurt and confused when she vanished afterward without a word. That silence had left a deeper mark than she might have realized. Satsuki's expression remained unreadable, which only frustrated him more. She reached out, gently tilting his chin upward with her fingers, and asked if he had been afraid she might disappear again because she had not shown up that morning. She tried to draw out whether he still had feelings for her, but Naoto firmly told her that whatever feelings he had once held were now in the past. Her face hardened at his words. Turning away, she said she wanted nothing more to do with him, then walked off in the opposite direction from school. As she vanished from sight, Naoto became aware of someone else's presence. Behind him, Suzu stood with a serious expression. She told him that they needed to talk after school. At school, Yukari was the first to greet Naoto, shyly asking if they could speak in private. She led him to a quiet spot and thanked him for the help he had given her during the beach trip. She had intended to confess, but before she could, several of her admirers arrived, eager for her attention. As she awkwardly waved them off, a few friends explained to Naoto that now that Yukari was confirmed to be single, she would be swamped with confessions for some time. Naoto listened but found his thoughts drifting back to the trip, remembering how his plan had been to grow closer to her. Meanwhile, Satsuki had skipped school entirely, lying on the grassy bank of a river with her eyes closed. Toki found her there and asked if she was all right. To his surprise, she spoke openly about her feelings for Naoto and admitted that part of her still hoped to get what she wanted. When he asked what that was, she gave an answer meant only for his ears. His eyes widened in shock. She added that Naoto could never understand it, or even Toki himself. But Toki quietly told her that he thought he understood at least some part of it. Later, Naoto spotted Satsuki arriving at school with Toki, and the sight caught him off guard. He wondered if something was going on between them. Even though she had once claimed she wasn't interested in Toki, the image stayed in his mind. Yukari called out to him, but he didn't hear, and she watched him walk away with a deflated look. By the end of the day, Yukari had gathered her courage again. She approached Naoto and asked if he would walk home with her. But just then, the school announcement summoned her club to clean the pool, and she remembered her obligation. Naoto sensed that Yukari was not quite herself. Later, he stumbled upon her in the boys' locker room, changing clothes. Before he could speak, he noticed a group of boys heading their way and quickly stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Yukari fumbled for words, flustered and embarrassed. Naoto realized she was in the wrong changing room and told her so. When the realization hit her, she froze in mortification. Naoto tried to buy Yukari some time by holding the door shut as the boys outside tried to force their way in. After a while, they gave up and decided to change near the pool instead. Yukari collapsed to the ground, relieved but also humiliated by what had just happened. Naoto crouched to check on her, but quickly turned away when he realized her state of undress. Before he could leave, she stopped him and asked him to keep his back turned. While changing, she began speaking about their first meeting, noting how it strangely resembled the situation now. When she finished dressing, she walked toward him with her feelings ready to be voiced. But at that exact moment, the door swung open and Naoto stumbled forward, falling on top of her. He quickly apologized, but before she could lose her nerve, she blurted out her confession. Then, flustered, she stood and ran off, leaving him stunned and unable to process what had happened. Later, as Naoto walked toward the school gates, he found Yukari waiting. He awkwardly greeted her, still unaware of what her earlier words meant. Her confusion deepened when he didn't react to her feelings, and only then did Naoto realize what she had said back in the changing room. Embarrassed, she told him he didn't need to answer right away before turning to run, only to bump into a wall. Forcing a small smile, she reassured him she was fine and hurried off again, leaving him standing there in shock, realizing his crush had just confessed to him. If you enjoyed the video and want more of it, please support the channel by leaving a like and subscribe. Let's help us reach a current goal of 10K subscribers. Take you out.